The Orange River mouth is one of few areas of sheltered shallow water along southern Africa's arid Atlantic coastline. It's a transboundary site forming the international border between South Africa and Namibia. It is South Africa's second most important estuary for biodiversity conservation and the sixth most important coastal wetland in southern Africa for birds and fish. In recognition of the estuary's ecological significance both locally and internationally, the Orange River mouth was given Ramsar status in 1991, but in 1995, which is the same year that the Namibian portion was granted Ramsar status, it was placed on the Montreux record, which is a list of degraded Ramsar wetlands in urgent need of conservation action. Estuaries like this one are highly productive ecosystems, and they really are the lifeblood in many ways of our own well-being. We rely on ecosystems. We rely on the oxygen that they provide. We rely on the carbon that they actually help to store in plants like the salt marsh. They provide everything that we need really to survive, and without this ecosystem, without all of these ecosystems, there wouldn't really be life on Earth as we know it. Historically, mines have been operational within the area since the early turn of the century, at least since the 1920s. While mining isn't directly responsible for the desertification of the estuary, the reality is that the mine does have an impact, and going forward and trying to rehabilitate this internationally important wetland, we have to build partnerships with the mining houses, and we have to be able to work together with the mines to come up with a solution that's going to be both sustainable and that's going to accomplish the goals all around of the community and of the mines and for the ecosystems that all of it actually depends on. Another major significant impact to the estuary is the causeway that was built and the flood control levees. And this causeway effectively has diverted the main river channel. There was historically a channel that would have run right next to Alexander Bay town and down through the salt marsh, but this has been diverted by the causeway to protect the farmlands and to protect the town of Alexander Bay from big flooding events. And that diversion of fresh water, it prevents the flushing of that hypersaline environment that the salt marsh so desperately needs to survive. That changing of the hydrology of the estuary has had a huge impact, because that natural dissipation of energy and fresh water influx into the salt marsh has completely disappeared. The removal of this causeway is one of the key interventions that we are aiming to try and achieve in partnership with other departments down the line. We've already undertaken a LiDAR survey of the area, which is an aerial survey with lasers, and we're developing models at the moment, and we plan to develop hydrodynamic models of the area so that we can better understand exactly where the water will flow in flooding events and where we can possibly strategically breach sections of the berm so that water can start flowing through the system again without affecting the town. One of the biggest impacts on the estuary ecosystem and the dynamics of the estuary is the beach access road, which effectively splits the estuary salt marsh into two. The beach access road was originally built to give residents of Alexander Bay access to the beach and also access to the mouth for recreational fishing. The biggest impact that this road has had on the salt marsh itself is that it's disrupted the connectivity between the main river channels and the salt marsh itself. So this has created a divide which has prevented fresh water from washing out the salts in the estuary, and in times when floods have managed to breach this road, the water hasn't been able to drain back out into the ocean, forming pools and raising the salt content of the salt marsh through evaporation. This section of the beach access road, this breach, is really the part that gives us the most hope in the story, because you can clearly see that with a small intervention, with a bit of manpower, taking away certain sections of the road can have quite a large and positive effect on the salt marsh. The water can be reconnected, it can flow through, and the salt marsh starts to grow back. So we believe that in other points, if we can breach these roads and the causeway strategically, that we'll be able to see a similar kind of effect throughout the salt marsh. This section of the salt marsh here is really one of my favorite areas, because you can really see how biodiversity is flourishing here. There's loads of flamingos that come and feed from this section. There's lots of vegetation, there's running water flowing through, and this is kind of the vision that we have for the rest of the salt marsh. This lush, healthy habitat that's used by biodiversity and that can be enjoyed by people as well. The Endangered Wildlife Trust is the South African implementing partner for a basin-wide project known as Applying the Ecosystems Approach in the Orange Senku Basin. The ecosystems approach is really a holistic way of looking at management, especially integrated water resource management. Ecosystems approach takes a broad view, a holistic view of everything within that ecosystem, including people, and recognizes that it's an integrated system and that there's many different parts, and that you have to take all of those into account in order for the ecosystem to function properly and specifically in a sustainable way. My role as a field officer is to come out here and to collect a lot of the information that we need to take out the guesswork as to what's happening on site. So, we have an idea that the bird populations are in decline, but we don't really know what's happening on a month-to-month basis or even a more finer scale basis. So I come out here and I collect the information that feeds into the science that we need to give us some of the answers that we're looking for in terms of management. So if we want to know what the changes are in water quality, we need that information. So I come here and I collect water quality samples, really just try and understand the system better. Then once I'm done with the water quality testing, then I also like to come out and explore the islands, and we've got a few camera traps that we set up occasionally to just get a better understanding as to what else is here. The data really is the thing that gives us the information. It's when we're not here, we can't see what's going on within the estuary, and also there's underlying things that the data can tell us. So, for example, we have the handheld water quality meter that can give us a snapshot at that time as to what's happening within the estuary. Where is the salt water? Where's the fresh water? What's the temperature difference along the profile? And different parameters like that, so we can understand better what makes good fish habitat, what makes good bird habitat, and also what happens if there is a big flood, or what happens if there's pollution upstream or things like that. We also have a permanent data logger which we've got installed, which runs and collects data every hour, and that gives us a much finer scale picture as to what's actually happening in the estuary. It's pretty wild right now. It's high tide, so I've got much further down to swim. It's really windy, so it's really rocking on the boat. but I have to install this right now because we don't want to miss out on any data, and it's really important that we get continuous data over a period of time. So I'm going to swim down here now and see if I can attach it. So that data really is essential to our understanding. Otherwise, without collecting that data, it's all really just guesswork.
We need that kind of information so that we can then be guided in terms of what kind of management interventions do we require to in order to manage sustainably or wisely that area.
And then also spend some time working and interacting with the community, and also to raise awareness of the estuary and just show the children especially how beautiful it is and what's actually right here on the doorstep, because a lot of them haven't had the opportunity to really understand the environmental beauty that's here.
Having Endangered Wildlife Trust on the ground, it helps the department to know what is happening on the ground, and also it helps the department to have people that engages with the communities, because communities are the ones that solely have an ownership of that particular ecosystem, because they solely benefit from the estuary on the ground.
So this project is a collaboration between a range of stakeholders, from national and provincial government departments to NGOs, to local municipality, to community organizations, to the mines. It's a partnership.
The Endangered Wildlife Trust fits into what Orascom is trying to achieve by participating as a stakeholder institution, as a non-governmental organization, with strength in issues to do with water resource management and biological diversity.
The project is also made possible by international funding through USAID and supported through IUCN. If we were to restore the estuary salt marsh, that ecosystem, back to a state that we believe that we can restore it to, then we would be seeing a very different picture. We would be seeing a healthy ecosystem. We would see something that is full of life. I think just with the right partnerships and with the right interventions, I think we can get this place back to something reminiscent of how it used to be.